Hi, welcome to my video on cosine rule. So this is carrying on with non-right angled triangles and trigonometry. Okay, we looked at the sine rule last time and we discussed that it had to have matching or a complete pair to use a sine rule. So this is the cosine rule, the cos button on your calculator, short for cosine. And again, this is given to you in the exam, so pause the video and keep notes as we go along. Okay, so the cosine rule, it does look a bit nasty. Okay, a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cos a. And it matches up with that triangle we used last lesson with capital A's for angles, capital letters for angles, sorry, and lowercase letters for sides. Now, if we have a look here at what this formula does, it works out little a, so it can tell you how long that side is if you know what little b is. So you'd need to know the length of that side. You need to know little c. So you need to know the length of that side. Then little b and little c again, so we've already used those. But you also need to know capital A. Okay. So to work out little a, you need, if I can get my highlight working, you need to know little b, little c, and capital A. Now we call that two sides and an included angle. It's a little bit like SAS from congruent triangles. So to use the cosine rule, you have to know two sides and the angle in between those two sides. And so we don't have to learn lots of different versions of the cosine rule with the letters jumbled around. We pretty much always try to make the angle capital A so that we can use this exact version of the formula instead of learning other versions just with the letters swapped around. Okay, so two sides and an included angle. If we have a look at a question, okay, first thing to check, do you have two sides and an included angle? Well, I've got two sides, 6 and 9, and I've got the 48, and yes, the 48 is in between the two sides, so I can use the cosine rule. Now, I only need one angle, I've only got one angle, you should call that angle capital A. Now, because opposites are pairs, that means that over here must be little a. And B and C, this is sort of the nicest bit of the cosine rule, B and C don't really matter which way around you put them. So you can put little b there and little c there, but it would make no difference because you're squaring them both, you're going to add them both, and then you're going to times them both. And none of those operations does it matter which way around B and C are. So you can even swap them around, okay, as long as 48 is capital A and X is little a. And then it's just dumping numbers into a formula. We'll come back to a squared at the end. You can probably figure out what we're going to have to do at the end there to get rid of the squared. But, okay, a squared equals, okay, so x squared, I suppose. So let's change that to an x squared. X squared equals b squared, so 6 squared, plus c squared, which is 9 squared, minus... Now, all of these things are stuck together. In algebra, things that are stuck together are times in. So when you type it into your calculator, you'll have to write 2 times b, which is 6, times c, which is 9, times cos capital A, which is cos 48. If you type all of that into your calculator in one go, you'll get that x squared equals 44.73, and leave it on your screen because we're not quite finished. I mean, 44 does seem a bit ridiculous for the side of a triangle where the other two are 6 and 9. Okay, to get rid of the x squared, we need to square root. So on your calculator, we're going to square root that 44.73 number. Okay, remember, you can just use the answer key on your calculator to make that a bit quicker. Our final answer for this question, you should get 6.69 when I round it to 2 decimal places. Okay, so once you've identified that it is the cosine rule with two sides and the included angle, and once you've labelled it up with A, B and C, it really is just dumping numbers into a formula. Okay, let's have a look at another one. If you want to pause the video and have a go yourselves first, that's fine by me. So we label it. Make sure you call your angle capital A. So little a goes down there. And then I'll put in a different colour. We'll have B there and C there. And again, it doesn't matter really which way around you put them. So putting our numbers in then, x squared equals b squared, so 9.6 squared, add c squared, which is 6.4 squared, take away 2 times 9.6 times 6.4 times cos of capital A, and capital A is 61 degrees. That'll give you quite a big number, 73.54, leave it on your calculator. When you square root that, you should get 8.58 centimetres. So the cosine rule is fairly straightforward to use as long as you've spotted when to use it. Okay, so I've got one more example like this, a little bit different this one. So pause the video and see if you can work out what's going on here. When you think you've worked it out, press play again and see if you were right. Okay, on this one, we've got two sides. We've got two angles, but neither of those two angles are included between the two sides. So if we're going to use the cosine rule, we're going to need to know the size of that angle there. That's our capital A because that's between the two sides, which is easy enough to do. You learnt in year 7 that angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. Those two add up to 107, so that gives us 73 degrees for our angle. Okay, now we've got two sides and the included angle, we can use the cosine rule. So x squared equals, I'll call that one B, that one C, 10 squared plus 6 squared minus 2 times 10 times 6 times cos 73. Look out for little tricky ones like that where the angles you're given are not necessarily the angles that you need. Okay, now that comes out as 100.91, and that's because we haven't finished, we haven't square rooted. That comes out as 10.05 centimetres when you round it to 2 decimal places, which is fairly typical when you're finishing your answer. Don't round halfway through if you can avoid it. Okay, so that's how you use the cosine rule to find a missing side. Now, you can also use the cosine rule to find a missing angle. But this is one of the trickier things you'll need to do. To find a missing angle, we need to get, ideally capital A, the angle on its own, or maybe more realistic would be to get cos A on its own. So you've got to rearrange this formula. Now you don't get given the rearranged version, you've got to sort of learn these steps. So it'd be a good idea to put this in your book. So, first rule, if we want capital A to be the subject, it can't be negative, and it is at the minute, look. So we bring all of this, all of that in brackets there, it's not really in brackets, but it makes it look a bit nicer. You bring all of that over and it becomes positive. It adds to the a squared on the other side. Okay, so all of that comes over. We get 2bc cos a plus the a squared that was already there equals b squared plus c squared. Okay, now we want to start getting cos a on its own. It's there at the minute. It's a bit tangled up in other stuff. Okay, so the easiest thing to move now would be to take that plus a squared to the other side, and it will change to a minus a squared. So 2bc cos a equals b squared plus c squared minus a squared. And we're almost there. Now we want to get rid of the 2bc part. Now there's no time sign, but it is times in. So if I want to move it to the other side, it becomes a dividing, which means it's going to make one big fraction that looks like this. B squared plus c squared, take away a squared, all over 2bc. Now, we could get capital A on its own by writing cos minus 1 of that entire fraction, but it looks a bit messy. What you'll just have to remember is that when you've used this version of the cosine rule, you do have to do cos minus 1 at the end. Let's have a look. Oh, didn't want it to take that arrow as well. So let's get rid of that. And you'll need to make sure this goes in your books. And your two choices are, you either learn how to make that formula in the box, or you just have to memorize the formula in the box. You're not given that one for an exam. Okay, so we've got a formula that will find us an angle as long as we know, look, little b, little c, and little a. So to use this version of the formula, you need to know all three sides. As long as you know all three sides, though, it's fairly straightforward. Now, the angle I'm finding has to be A. So if I decide that this is the angle I want, this automatically becomes capital A. Okay, because it's capital A in the formula. So that becomes little a. But again, b squared and c squared don't matter. So I'll put them that way round. And then what we get is that cos A equals 7 squared plus 11 squared, b and c. Take away 14 squared. You've got to get these the right way round, otherwise it won't work on the calculator. All divided by 2 times 7 times 11. And remember, that's cos A equals, and it actually comes out as minus, but don't panic about that, that's fine, minus 0.16. We want A on its own, remember? So we need to get rid of that cos. The inverse of cos is cos minus 1. So cos minus 1, you can use the answer key in your calculator. You should be able to get an angle of 99.72. And if I wanted any of the other angles in that triangle, all I'd need to do is change the lettering. So if I wanted the angle down in the bottom right, if I wanted this one down here, I could just call that capital A and relabel all the sides and start again. You can find any angle you like. Okay, I'll do another one of those. So this time I want to find the angle in the bottom right. That has to be A. Okay, save you a lot of work anyway. So that's automatically little a. I'll do little b on the bottom and little c on the top. And so we've got cos A equals, so going back to our formula, look, b squared plus c squared minus a squared. So 13 squared plus 9 squared minus 7 squared, all divided by 2bc. 2 times 9 times 13, doesn't really matter which way around you write those. We get cos A equals 0.858. When you do cos minus 1, okay, because anytime you find an angle, you need to do sine minus 1 or cos minus 1. If it's SOHCAHTOA, you might end up doing tan minus 1. But cos minus 1 for the cosine rule, 30.80 degrees. Okay, and that is the cosine rule. So as it's given to you in the exam, you just label up your sides, make sure that the angle is capital A and dump the numbers in. If you're trying to find an angle, well, firstly, you'd need to know all three sides. If you know all three sides, you need to get this rearranged version of the cosine rule. I just put the numbers in and do cos minus 1 at the end and you should be sorted. Okay, there we go. That's the cosine rule.